The credit rejection letter was the final, humiliating nail in the coffin. It was for a simple, secured car loan, a modest amount for a reliable used vehicle to get me to my second job. The reason for denial was stark and damning: a credit score in the low 400s and a massive, defaulted business loan under my name. As I held the letter, my hands trembling slightly, I could see my sister, Chloe, in my mind's eye. Not the struggling, tearful entrepreneur she had pretended to be, but the smiling, confident woman in her latest social media post, posing in front of her newly purchased condo. The same condo she bought with the insurance payout from the tragic, unforeseeable failure of the very business whose debt was now strangling my financial life. The loan I had been forced to sign for under the threat of homelessness hadn't just been a bad investment. It had been my assigned role in her meticulously planned scam. It all began with what my parents called Chloe's brilliant idea. I was 22 at the time, living at home to save money while working a thankless retail job. Chloe, 2 years older, had always been the star of the family, charismatic, ambitious, and perpetually full of grand schemes that never quite panned out. This time it was a bespoke artisanal candle business. She had a name, a logo, and a binder full of what she called market research. She presented it to our parents like a CEO pitching to investors. They were immediately captivated, their faces glowing with pride. She was their creative genius, their shining star. And this, they were certain, was her ticket to the success they always knew she deserved. I, the quiet, practical son, was expected to be her cheerleader. The problem, as always, was money. Chloe had no savings and a terrible credit history from a series of past ventures. No bank would touch her. And so, the family council convened at the dinner table. It wasn't a discussion, it was a directive. My father laid out the plan. I had good credit. I had a steady job. I would be the co-signer, no, the primary applicant, on a small business loan. It would be in my name, but it was for Chloe's business. "It's just a formality," my father said, waving his hand dismissively. "The business will pay for itself in 6 months. Your name is just the key to get the engine started." My mother added that it was my duty, as a brother, to help my sister achieve her dreams. I refused. It was the first time I had ever stood up to them. I explained, calmly and rationally, that putting a $50,000 loan in my name was a huge risk. I had my own future to think about, my own plans to save for a small apartment. What if the business failed? The question hung in the air, a piece of blasphemy in the temple of Chloe's ambition. My father's face darkened. My mother looked at me as if I had just uttered a curse. Chloe burst into tears, a calculated, theatrical performance of a dream being crushed. The emotional pressure in the room was immense, a thick, suffocating blanket of guilt and expectation. When the guilt trip didn't work, they resorted to threats. My father, his voice low and menacing, reminded me that I was living under his roof, rent-free. He told me that if I wasn't willing to be a contributing member of the family team, then perhaps I didn't deserve the benefits of living in the family home. The threat was clear: sign the loan or get out. My mother backed him up, her disappointment a sharp, cutting weapon. She told me she couldn't believe how selfish I had become, that I would put my own minor anxieties ahead of my sister's entire future. They had cornered me, leaving me with an impossible choice: financial ruin or homelessness. I spent that night staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, a room that no longer felt like a sanctuary but a prison cell. I felt a profound sense of injustice. I had always been the responsible one. I worked hard, I saved my money, I never asked for anything. My good behavior and financial discipline were not assets to be proud of, but commodities to be exploited. My good credit wasn't a reflection of my character. It was a family resource they felt entitled to use for their favored child. I was the mule, and my only purpose was to carry the load for their prized racehorse. The next day, defeated and numb, I went to the bank with Chloe. She was radiant, her tears from the night before replaced by a beaming, triumphant smile. She held my arm as we walked in, telling me how much this meant to her, how we were partners in this amazing new venture. The bank manager looked over the application, noted my steady employment and clean credit history, and approved the loan without a second glance. I signed the papers in a daze, the ink from the pen feeling like a tattoo, a permanent mark of my subjugation. As we left the bank, Chloe promised me she would make the payments every month, that I wouldn't have to worry about a thing. For the first few months, things seemed to be going well. Chloe rented a small workshop space and filled it with expensive equipment. She posted constantly on social media, showing off her beautifully crafted candles, her trendy packaging, her growing brand. My parents were her biggest fans, sharing every post, telling all their friends about their brilliant, entrepreneurial daughter. I received automated emails from the bank each month, confirming that the loan payment had been made. I allowed myself a small, cautious sliver of hope. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe this time, one of Chloe's schemes would actually work. Then, 6 months in, I received a notice from the bank, a missed payment. I called Chloe immediately. She was full of apologies, blaming a mix-up with a supplier, a temporary cash flow problem. She assured me it was a one-time thing, and that she would catch up next month. She asked if I could possibly cover the payment this one time to avoid any dings on my credit. Reluctantly, I agreed, draining my small savings account to do so. I told myself it was a small price to pay to keep the dream and my credit score alive. It was not a one-time thing. The next month, the same thing happened. Another missed payment. This time, Chloe's excuse was more dramatic. A big order had been canceled at the last minute. She was devastated, but she promised she was already lining up new clients. Again, she asked me to cover the payment. Again, like a fool, I did. This time by taking a cash advance on my credit card. I was now actively going into debt to finance her failing business. The stress was starting to affect my health. I was having trouble sleeping, my stomach in a constant knot of anxiety. I was living with a financial guillotine hanging over my head. The business officially folded just shy of its 1-year anniversary. Chloe called me, weeping hysterically. She told me everything had gone wrong. The market had dried up. Her suppliers had let her down. She had been the victim of a series of unfortunate events. According to her, none of it was her fault. The business hadn't failed because of her lack of experience or poor planning. It had been murdered by a cruel and unforgiving world. Her narrative was one of a tragic fallen hero, and she played the part to perfection. And then came the final act of her performance. A month after the business closed, she called me with what she framed as a silver lining. "You won't believe it," she said, her voice full of a strange, almost manic excitement. "The workshop, there was a fire. A faulty wire, they think. It's all gone. But don't worry, I had insurance. A really good policy." She told me the insurance payout would be enough to cover most of the outstanding business loan. It wouldn't be immediate, she said, but relief was on the way. The fire, she explained, was a blessing in disguise. The story of the fire seemed too convenient, but I was so desperate for a solution, so eager to be free of the debt, that I chose to believe her. My parents praised her foresight in getting such a good insurance policy. They saw it as proof of her business acumen, even in failure. We all waited for the insurance money to come through, for the loan to be paid off, for my financial nightmare to end. But the weeks turned into months and the loan payments remained my sole responsibility. Every time I asked Chloe about the insurance payout, she had a new excuse. The insurance company was dragging its feet. There was a lot of red tape. It was a slow process. The truth, as always, came out through a third party. I ran into an old high school friend who had worked for Chloe for a few months before quitting in disgust. He told me the real story. The business was never viable. Chloe was spending the loan money on expensive dinners, new clothes, and funding her lavish lifestyle. The workshop was barely used. And the fire? He told me he'd bet his life it was arson. He said Chloe had been talking about her fantastic insurance policy for weeks before the accident. The business hadn't failed. It had been designed to fail, a vehicle for a loan and an insurance claim. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me. It wasn't just a failed business. It was a calculated fraud, and I had been the willing and then unwilling accomplice. The loan I was struggling to pay wasn't a business debt. It was the seed money for her scam. I had been used from the very beginning as a pawn in her long con. The threats of being kicked out, the tears, the promises, it was all part of the script. My parents hadn't been innocent bystanders. They had been her willing producers, helping her to set the stage and manipulate her lead actor, me. When I confronted Chloe with this, she didn't even bother to deny it. She just laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she said. "It's just business. Sometimes you have to be creative to get ahead. The insurance money came through and I've invested it. You should be happy for me." When I screamed at her about the loan, about the debt that was still in my name, she just shrugged. "That's a separate issue," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "The loan was your contribution to the startup. All startups have risks. Yours just didn't pay off. I'll pay you back when my new investments mature." Her new investment, I soon discovered, was a down payment on a luxury condo. She posted a picture of herself on the balcony, holding a glass of champagne, with the caption, "Hard work pays off. Boss babe, not new home." The photo was a dagger in my heart. She was celebrating her hard work, a victory lap funded by my ruin. The insurance money had never been intended for the loan. It had been her exit strategy, her golden parachute. She had left the burning wreckage of the business with a bag of cash, leaving me chained to the debt. My life became a living hell. The bank started calling me daily. First polite reminders, then insistent demands, then outright threats of legal action. I was working over 60 hours a week at 2 different jobs, and every penny I earned went to paying the minimum on a loan for a business that had never really existed. I had no life. I had no future. I was a slave to her debt. My credit score, once my only real asset, plummeted. It was a digital representation of my life, in ruins. I tried to explain the situation to the bank, to tell them I had been the victim of a fraud. They were sympathetic, but legally, their hands were tied. My signature was on the loan. I was the responsible party. They suggested I pursue legal action against my sister, but like the lawyer in my previous story, I knew it was a hopeless and expensive path. Proving her intent, proving the arson, would be nearly impossible. She had covered her tracks perfectly. She had used the plausible deniability of a failed business as the perfect cover for her crime. My parents predictably took her side. When I told them about the insurance money, about the condo, they rationalized it. They said Chloe deserved some compensation for her trauma and effort. They claimed she was reinvesting the money and would eventually make enough to pay back the loan. They told me I needed to be more patient, more understanding. They were willfully blind, refusing to see their perfect daughter as the calculating criminal she was. They chose her fantasy over my reality, because my reality implicated them in the crime. It was easier to believe in her success than to acknowledge their role in my destruction. I became a ghost in my own family. I was the embarrassing secret, the walking, talking evidence of a crime they had all tacitly agreed to ignore. At family gatherings, the subject of Chloe's business or my financial struggles was a conversational black hole, an area of silent mutual avoidance. Chloe would talk about her beautiful new condo, and my parents would beam with pride, while I sat there, invisible, my presence a silent, screaming accusation that no one wanted to hear. The isolation was absolute. I was a pariah in my own home. The stress finally took its toll. I ended up in the emergency room with a panic attack that I thought was a heart attack. The doctors told me I was suffering from extreme stress and exhaustion. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. The medical bills from that one visit added another layer to my mountain of debt. I was literally getting sick from the financial burden Chloe had placed on me, a burden that was funding her healthy, happy, stress-free life. It was during my recovery from that episode that I finally hit rock bottom and found a strange kind of clarity. I was sitting in my cramped apartment surrounded by a pile of overdue bills, and I realized I had been trying to play by the rules of a game that was rigged against me. I had been trying to be the good son, the responsible brother, hoping that my good behavior would eventually be recognized and rewarded, but that was never going to happen. My role in this family was fixed. I was the designated loser, the one whose sacrifices were necessary for the designated winner to succeed. And so, I made a decision. I would stop playing. I couldn't legally escape the debt, but I could emotionally and psychologically escape the family that had put me in this position. I changed my phone number. I moved to a different apartment in a different part of the city without telling them. I created a new life, a secret one, where they could not find me. It was a drastic, painful move, like amputating a limb that had become gangrenous. It hurt, but I knew it was the only way to save the rest of me. The first few months of my new life were incredibly difficult. I was completely alone, with no support system, but I was also free. Free from their judgment, their expectations, their toxic manipulations. I focused on one thing and one thing only: survival. I worked, I ate, I slept. My life was stripped down to its bare essentials. And in that simplicity, I began to find a strange sense of peace. I was no longer a character in their family drama. I was the protagonist of my own, much quieter story. I had to declare bankruptcy. It was a humiliating, soul-crushing process. I sat in a sterile office listing my meager assets and my single colossal debt, feeling like a complete failure. But the moment the judge's gavel fell, the moment the debt was legally discharged, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I had been carrying for years. My credit was destroyed for the next decade, but I was no longer a slave. The bankruptcy was not an admission of my failure. It was a public record of their crime. It was the only form of justice I was ever going to get. Starting over with a ruined credit score is like trying to run a race with your legs tied together. I couldn't get a credit card. I couldn't get a decent car loan. Renting a new apartment was a nightmare of explaining my financial history to skeptical landlords. I was a financial leper, shunned by a system that saw only a number, not the story of betrayal behind it. Every rejection was a fresh reminder of what Chloe had done, a new echo of her crime that rippled through every aspect of my life. But I persisted. I worked. I saved every penny. I paid for everything in cash. I lived a life of extreme frugality. It was a slow, arduous process, but with each month that passed, I felt myself getting stronger, more independent. I was rebuilding my life from the ground up, on a foundation of my own making. And this time, it was a foundation that was built to last, a foundation that was not dependent on the whims or betrayals of others. I saw my father once, about a year after I had disappeared. I was on my lunch break, eating a sandwich on a park bench, and he walked by. He didn't see me. He looked older, more stooped, a sadness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. For a moment, I felt a pang of pity, a flicker of the old familial bond. But then I remembered the threat, the coldness, the choice he had made, and the pity was replaced by a quiet, firm resolve. He had made his bed. He and my mother had chosen their golden child, and now they had to live with the consequences of that choice, just as I was living with mine. I have no idea what Chloe is doing now. I have deliberately kept myself from looking her up on social media. I don't want to know. Her life, her successes, her lies, they are no longer a part of my story. She is a ghost from a past life, a cautionary tale that I will carry with me forever, but one that no longer has any power over me. My focus is on the future, on the slow, steady process of building a life of quiet dignity, far from the wreckage she left behind. This forum post is a part of that process. It is a way of externalizing the story, of giving it a name and a shape, so that it no longer has to live only in the dark corners of my mind. It is a warning to others about the dangers of familial pressure, about the devastating consequences of becoming the financial fall guy for a favored sibling. Your good credit is not a family resource. Your future is not a bargaining chip. Do not let anyone, not even your own parents, tell you otherwise. I am slowly, painstakingly rebuilding my credit. I have a secured credit card with a tiny limit, and I pay it off in full every month. It's a long road back, but it's a road I am walking on my own. Every on-time payment is a small act of defiance, a small victory against the ruin she tried to inflict on me. I am reclaiming my financial identity, one small, responsible step at a time. It is the most difficult and the most rewarding work I have ever done. I still have nightmares about the bank, about signing those papers, but they are becoming less frequent. They are being replaced by a quiet, steady determination. I will not be defined by her crime. I will not be the victim in her story. I will be the hero of my own. A hero who is not defined by wealth or success, but by his ability to endure, to rebuild, and to find a way to live with integrity in a world that has shown him the very worst of human nature. My parents enabled a criminal. They chose to sacrifice their responsible son to fund the get-rich-quick scheme of their reckless daughter. They are complicit in the fraud, not just emotionally, but morally, and that is a truth they will have to live with. My absence in their lives is the mirror in which they are forced to see their own failure, not as parents, but as decent human beings. My silence is my final and most powerful statement. So, here is the lesson I have learned, the lesson I paid for with my future. In some families, love is not a currency of affection, but a complex system of transactions and power dynamics. And in these families, the responsible one is often just the one who is expected to absorb all the losses. If you find yourself in this role, do not mistake your burden for a badge of honor. It is not your duty to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your only duty is to save yourself. Walk away. It will be the hardest and the best decision you ever make. I am not sure if I will ever be able to trust someone completely again. The scar Chloe left is deep, and it has changed the way I see the world. I am more cautious now, more guarded, but I am also more discerning. I am learning to distinguish between genuine affection and self-serving manipulation. It is a painful education, but a necessary one. I will not make the same mistake again. I will not allow my desire for love and acceptance to blind me to the truth. My life now is small, but it is honest. I have a few good friends who know my story and who have supported me without judgment. I have a job that pays the bills. I have a roof over my head. It is not the life I had planned, but it is a life I have built with my own 2 hands, out of the rubble of the one that was destroyed. And in that, I am finding a quiet, resilient pride. I am a survivor, and that is more than Chloe, with all her stolen money, can ever say. The rage has mostly subsided, replaced by a kind of weary peace. I have accepted that there will be no apology, no justice, no restitution. The universe is not a fair place. But I have found a different kind of justice. The justice of living my own life, on my own terms. The justice of being free from their toxic influence. The justice of knowing that I am a better person than they are. And that is a victory that no amount of money can buy and no amount of betrayal can take away. I am saving money again. It's a slow, painstaking process. A few dollars tucked away from each paycheck. It's nowhere near what I had before, but it feels more valuable. Because this time, it is truly mine. It is protected by a wall of hard-won experience. It is a fund for my future, a future that I alone will control, a future that is not for sale, at any price. It is the first brick in the new foundation of my life, a foundation that will be built to withstand any storm. I am no longer living under the shadow of that defaulted loan. The bankruptcy wiped the slate clean, at a great cost, but the emotional debt is one I will carry for a long time. It is a reminder of my own naivety, of the price of blind trust, but it is also a reminder of my own strength, of my capacity to survive the worst and start again. It is a scar, but it is a scar that I have learned to live with. It is a part of my story, but it is not the end of my story. To anyone reading this who feels trapped by family obligation, who is being pressured to sacrifice their own financial well-being for a sibling's dream, I have only one thing to say: don't do it. Your future is not a gift you can afford to give away. Your security is not a resource to be plundered. Say no. It will be hard. It will cause conflict, but it will save you from a world of pain. I wish someone had given me that advice. I wish I had been strong enough to take it. The condo Chloe bought with the insurance money is in a trendy part of downtown. I walk by it sometimes on my way to my night job. I look up at the brightly lit windows, and I don't feel anger or jealousy. I feel a strange kind of pity. She is living in a beautiful cage, built with the bars of her own deceit. She has a beautiful home, but she has no moral foundation. She has financial security, but she has no integrity. She won the battle, but she lost the war, because the war was for her own soul. I have come to realize that my parents are victims too. They are victims of their own blind favoritism, of their desperate need to see their daughter as the success they always wanted her to be. They were so invested in the fantasy of Chloe that they were willing to sacrifice the reality of me. They are trapped in a prison of their own making, a prison of denial and enabling. And that, in its own way, is a fate worse than mine. I am free of them. They will never be free of her. The greatest irony is that the brilliant business Chloe created was a lie. But in the process, I have been forced to become a master of my own small enterprise, the business of survival. I am the CEO of my own life now. I manage my own meager assets. I make my own strategic decisions. I am a self-made man in the truest sense of the word, not because I am rich, but because I have made a life for myself out of nothing, and that is a business that will never go bankrupt. My dreams are smaller now, but they are more real. I no longer dream of grand artistic careers or spacious homes. I dream of a quiet life, a life with a steady job, a few good friends, and a small, safe place to call my own. A life free of drama and deceit. A life where my worth is not measured by my utility to others, but by my own quiet contentment. It is a humble dream, but it is a dream that is entirely within my own power to achieve, and that makes it the most beautiful dream of all. I am learning to trust my own judgment again. For years, I doubted myself, believing that my refusal to sign the loan was a sign of my own selfishness, just as they had told me. But now I know the truth. My initial instinct was right. I was the only sane person in a room full of people who had been blinded by their own fantasies. learning to listen to that quiet, rational voice inside me, the voice they tried so hard to silence, is the most important skill I am developing. It is my compass, and it is pointing me in the right direction. The legal system failed me. The family system failed me. But I am determined not to fail myself. I am the only one I can truly count on, and I am learning to be a reliable ally to myself. I am learning to treat myself with the kindness and respect that my own family denied me. It is a slow, ongoing process of self-reclamation. I am taking back the territory of my own life, one small fortified border at a time, and I will not cede that territory to anyone, ever again. The name on the defaulted loan is still my own, a ghost in the credit reporting system that will haunt me for years to come. But it is just a name. It is not my identity. My identity is not defined by a credit score or a bank statement. It is defined by my actions, by my resilience, by my refusal to be broken. Chloe may have stolen my good name in the financial world, but I am building a new one, a better one, in the world that truly matters. A name that is synonymous with integrity and survival. The threats my father made, the threat of being kicked out of my own home, now seems so hollow. I was so afraid of losing that small, safe space that I was willing to trade my entire future for it. I have learned a hard lesson. A cage, no matter how comfortable, is still a cage. True safety is not found in the four walls of a house, but in the freedom to make your own choices, to control your own destiny. I lost a house, but I have gained my freedom, and I am slowly learning that it was a worthy trade. I am sharing this story not for sympathy, but for solidarity. To let others know that they are not alone, that the silent, hidden betrayals that happen within families are real, and they are devastating, and to let them know that it is possible to survive them. It is possible to rebuild. It is possible to find a different kind of family, a different kind of home, a home that is built not on blood, but on the solid ground of mutual respect and genuine love. I will be okay. I don't just hope it, I know it. The path ahead is difficult, but I am equipped for the journey. I have been through the fire and I have come out the other side, scarred but not consumed. I am stronger than I ever thought possible. And that strength is the one thing they could not take from me. It is the one asset that is truly, irrevocably mine. It is the foundation on which I will build the rest of my life.